No, I'm sorry, that's, we're live. Do you want us? Okay.
We are the Senate Government Operations Committee back live. We are passing around cookies now. And Allison,
Oh, thank you very much.
okay. Sorry, Becky, that you're not here in person to get a cookie.
They've got like some.
They are magic cookies made by Olivia.
You don't want to ask what's in them.
They're vegan and magical cookies. So we have a new draft of S9. So I was hoping that maybe you could walk us through the new version, so we all understand where we're at with it before, and then we're gonna have some testimony before we take a vote on it. So go ahead.
Okay, so Becky Wasserman, Legislative Counsel. So you should have draft 1.3 of the amendment to S9. This is presented as a strike-all amendment. The previous version that the committee saw was just an instance of amendment because only one change was being made. But since a number of changes were made, it is now a strike-all. So I've highlighted in yellow where all the changes were from the previous version. So there's a few points throughout the bill where the committee had discussed limiting the auditor's authority to conduct an audit on contractors and examine the books and records of contractors, and limiting it to the performance of the contract. So I made that change in a number of places. The first you'll see is on page 1 in section 163 subdivision 1C, which is the language that allows the auditor to audit every department, institution, and agency of the state, including contractors, as it relates to the performance of the contract with the state. And then again on page 2, in subdivision 13, language is added here that gives the auditor the discretion to examine the records, accounts, books, papers, reports, and returns of any contractor. And that is also limited to those that are relevant to the performance of the contract with the state. In addition to that change, on line 9, there's also another new sentence that was added. And this has to do with creating an exemption to the Public Records Act, which is another issue that was raised in the committee. So this new language says that any of the records, accounts, books, papers, reports, and returns that the auditor acquires pursuant to this authority in the subdivision to examine those documents, the auditor, that any of those documents that would not otherwise be available to the public are exempt from public inspection and copying under the Public Records Act. And the next change, I don't see any questions, so I'll move on. The next change on page 3 in section 3, this was a section that was added in the previous version of the amendment, and this is directing the Secretary of Administration to amend Bulletin 3.5 to specifically include terms that authorize the auditor to examine records, accounts, and books and papers of a contractor that's providing services to the state. And I've also included in language here that this has to relate to the performance of the contract. And then the final change is a new section 4. The committee heard some testimony from Chris Delia. I've lost track of time. I think that was earlier in the week. That there is a section in Title 8 in it's Title 8 10203 that specifically prohibits a financial institution from disclosing to any person any financial information relating to a customer. And there was a concern that was raised that this provision of state law would prohibit financial institutions to provide this information to the auditor under this new authority that is being created. So there are some exceptions in statute to this prohibition. And so the language that is added here on page 4 is adding the auditor's authority to examine the records of contractors to this exception. So that is page 4, lines 4 through 8. One of the exceptions that's already in statute is that the examination of financial records by or the disclosure of financial records to an officer, employee, or agent of a regulatory agency would be exempt from this prohibition. And so this language on line 5 is adding the auditor into the type of regulatory officer that would be exempt under this examination exception.
Excellent. Does anyone have any questions for Becky? And we also have Tucker here as backup because of the Public Records Act provisions. Senator White.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I appreciate this language. I think especially around the Public Records Act piece, calling it out will give comfort to those who were concerned. But can I just get confirmation that even without this language, I mean, it would still have the same impact?
Are you asking Becky or Tucker?
I would be at Tucker. You had, I believe Tucker's open. I mean, maybe I'll wait until Tucker.
Becky, do you want to answer that question, or should we have Tucker answer that question?
I just want to clarify, is the question whether the effect of the Public Records Act is the same with or without this language? If so, I think the answer, well, I'll let Tucker answer that. I think that's in his area.
Really page 2, section line 8.
Do you want to come up to the table, Tucker?
Yeah, apologies, sorry.
No, it's fine. It's a good question.
All right, good afternoon, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel. The Public Records Act is going to apply universally. This adds a new exemption, essentially, to the Public Records Act. And it states that any of the records, and there's the exhaustive list of reports and accounts and books that are acquired pursuant to this new authority for the auditor will be exempt from the Public Records Act, with the exception that if any of those records are already available to the public, the auditor will be allowed to disclose those. So,
so it
for
is
instance, if the contractors had filed some sort of public report with an agency, then they would be able to transfer that over, but they wouldn't be able to transfer over any new records that they have received pursuant to this new examination.
Okay, that answers my question. I thought this was more redundant than not, but it sounds like that's not true. Thank you.
We try to avoid redundancy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Self and suspenders.
Okay.
Yeah. And the auditor office has seen this language and they're okay with it. And we worked through a lot of the redundancy issues actually this morning to make sure it wasn't redundant.
There you go.
So, all right, thank you, Tucker and Abby. I'm sorry, Becky. Sorry, Becky, for your work on this and for sticking with us on this. If you're able to stay, I know Becky, you have another place to go at 3:30, right? Okay. If you're able to hang out for just a little bit, well, just in case, that would be helpful. And we are going to hear now from the Agency of Transportation, and we have Jeremy Squared here with us. You want to come up, and you have seen the new draft, so you're able to speak to this.
Yes.
If it's relevant.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to introduce ourselves because you haven't been in here yet.
Excellent.
And so, yeah, I'm Ruth Hardy, Senator from Addison County.
Olivia Parker, Committee Assistant.
Tanya Vyhovsky, Senator from Chittenden Central.
Rebecca White from Windsor County District.
Bob Norris, Franklin County.
Ann Watson, Allison Clarkson, Windsor County District.
Yeah. and just introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So my name is Jeremy Reed. I'm the state construction engineer for the Agency of Transportation. And this is Jeremy Stevens. He's the chief of contract administration for the agency. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to testify. And we do recognize and appreciate the changes that were made. And we do feel that it definitely made the bill better. However, we do still oppose the bill because we view it as a duplicative oversight mechanism. Our oversight procedures are concurred with by Federal Highway, FAA, FRA, FEMA, and we retain all documents that would demonstrate compliance with the contract, and we have retention record requirements associated with that. Examples of these records would be certified payrolls, notarized material certifications, material test results, certifications of insurance, performance bonds, and upon request, we can get all the bid documents that a contractor would have used to put their bid together. So in totality, we have to maintain everything that would demonstrate a contractor complied with the contract. Once we perform our duties, the auditor does audit us to make sure we're following those processes. And in fact, tomorrow morning, we've got a closeout meeting where they looked at 14 paving projects. Additionally, all those federal entities audit us to make sure we're doing that. And those are entirely random. We don't know when or how they're going to come. So, we can't steer the ship in any way. So that's the root cause of our opposition, and welcome any questions.
Well, thank you. I think though that one of the issues is the auditor not being able to get information directly from the entity you're contracting with, and that you're able to get that information, but the auditor is not able to get that information. And so this would just allow the auditor to get the information from the entity, but you're still not.
Well, I guess, and forgive me, but I don't know why that would be necessary, because we get it contemporaneous of the execution of the contract. So by the time the auditor would want to see that information, we would have it, and we would certainly provide it to the auditor.
Mm-hmm. Are you familiar? Yeah, I'm guessing you're familiar with the court case that this is a result of, and that the auditor was not considered an agent of the state, and that just seems a little fishy considering the auditor is an elected official in the state.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not here to provide testimony on that because, again, we are an agent of the state, right? So we get those records, and then the auditor certainly gives it. We can give them to the auditor directly.
Yeah. Okay. Senator White.
Thank you, Chair. What would be the additional workload for you if this bill were to pass? What I think I've heard from you today is that you already keep the records, you have the information, and you already are subject to audit. So I guess I'm not understanding what the additional workload would be.
Yeah, I don't think it's a workload issue. I think it is strictly, we have a very small bidding pool for our projects, and anything that would be deemed as an annoyance or a hindrance or work for a contractor could have a chilling effect on that bidding pool.
On that point, how many bidders have left bidding in Vermont because of an annoyance or concern because of the auditor?
I have no idea. I couldn't possibly answer.
Anecdotally, one or two or a year on average?
Well, from the auditor, none, because I don't believe the auditor has had the ability or the direction to go after it, or not go after, but to review a contractor's records directly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not aware of an instance where that's occurred.
Okay, okay, thank you.
So it hasn't really been an issue.
Yeah, that's what's
I
confusing.
think that's what's confusing us, is this hasn't really been an issue for AOT.
It hasn't been an issue, but I guess the concern is if there is a increased expectation that an auditor could go to a contractor directly and review their books, that would in itself have a chilling effect.
Senator Clarkson.
So previous to the court's decision, I think everyone assumed the auditor had that ability anyway. So I don't really understand what the issue is here. I mean, all of us thought the auditor had this ability. So it hasn't had a chilling effect. It's kind of standard for auditors to be able to do this. I believe we heard from around the country. This was I think, a fairly odd decision on the court's part, as much as I respect our Supreme Court. We're all human. So I guess previous to your testimony, it hasn't been an issue with AOT, and we all assumed the auditor could do this. So I'm unclear why the administration is landing so hard on this. What are they so afraid of, and why are they fear mongering on this?
Well, I guess what I would say is, I can't speak to what's happening nationally. I don't think contractors ever had it on their radar that the auditor would have the ability to inspect their records directly. And when I did reach out to my counterparts in New Hampshire and Maine, they unequivocally said, absolutely not, this would not happen in Maine and New Hampshire.
Do you have contractors who work in the state of Massachusetts or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts?
Yes, we do.
Because the auditor just definitely has access to contractor information in the state or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, for sure. So I think that most of the entities that would be contracting with Vermont for transportation issues probably also work in Massachusetts. So they are probably quite familiar with this.
Yeah, I don't know that. I definitely know most of our contractors are sort of in the northern New England states. I couldn't begin to speculate how many work in Massachusetts. And just to clarify, I don't think the administration is coming down hard on this or trying to fearmonger. We're just saying this does have a potential chilling effect. I'm not trying to say this is an absolute fatal bill or anything like that.
That has an aspect of pushing the fear button, I would say.
Yeah, Senator Norris.
Madam Chair, I mean, it appears as though, for whatever reason, the Auditor of County is not an agent of the state. That just came to my mind here, okay? So wouldn't it have been better? I mean, is a constitutional, why don't we just make him an agent of the state? So he has those acts. We just give him the opportunity or the authority to go inspect records here, but still doesn't say he's an agent of the state though.
This is essentially, I mean, I don't want to speak for Becky because is she still there?
Oh.
Becky is still there. I mean, this bill is responding to the court case that denied the auditor access to these. So do you want to answer Senator Norris's question?
Yeah, 'cause it's a good question.
Yeah, so one of the arguments that the auditor made was that in the OneCare case was that under the contract between DVA and OneCare, there was a provision in the contract that allowed for the audit of OneCare, and there was also a provision in the state standard provisions that are attached to all state contracts, attachment C, that allows for the audit of a contractor's records. And the auditor said, I am the person who audits, is a auditor for the state of Vermont. So I am considered, under both of these terms, I should be considered an authorized representative that is allowed to view these records for an audit. And the court said, actually, you're not, because in the contract with DVA, it doesn't specifically name you as an authorized representative. You aren't a third party beneficiary of the contract. And then same when they looked at the attachment C, the state standard contract provisions, it just references that an authorized representative of the state can request those records for an audit, but said, there's nothing in these state standard contracts that provisions that say that you are considered, an authorized representative for the state. So what the bill is doing is saying to the Secretary of Administration, update your state standard contracts and provisions to clarify that the auditor can do those examinations of books and records and is considered essentially, an authorized representative who's able to do that.
Yeah, so that's what this bill does and why we're doing it. So that the auditor can then perform his duty there. The auditor's office can perform their duties as the auditors of the state. Senator Clarkson.
But to go to Bob's, I think, underlying question, which is how would we, I think we all assume that all the statewide electeds are agents of the state in their various capacities, or authorities on the state in their various capacities, the treasurer, the secretary of state, the auditor, those three in particular. And in their varying capacities, they have the authority of the state when they speak on their subject areas or need to work in their subject areas. Becky, how do we ensure that they're all considered agents and authorities of the state, or whatever the right language is?
Well, I don't know if I could speak that broadly, but I can speak to what the court said specifically about the auditor. So what they did was look at the auditor's authority and statute, because the Constitution doesn't say that the auditor is a representative, an agent of the state for this purpose. But if you look to state statute and where the auditor's duties are set forth, that's where in section 1 of the bill, it lists, the auditor is authorized to do that list of responsibilities. And the first one was, conduct audits of all state departments, departments and entities. And then it specifically said of the state. So that's where the court said, yes, you are arguably sort of an agent to look of the state to look at any state or department, any entity of the state, but not your statutory authority does not extend to contractors who are contracting with the state. So that is why the bill is expanding that authority, that statutory authority.
Right, I'm clear on that. I guess that each office, we'd have to look at the statutes that govern each one of those. To answer Bob's question, really, which is we'd have to look at each statute which gives the authority to each one of those
Right.
offices.
They are agents of the state.
Right, and I think the court, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong, Becky, but I think the court said something to the effect of the legislature is good at assigning duties when they want to, and they know how to do that.
So,
And we hadn't specifically assigned this duty, and so now we are, because that's our job.
Right.
Is that essentially what they
Yeah,
said?
they said that, the legislature knows how to, authorize to provide this authority when it wants to. And the court went on to list a number of places that the legislature had given the auditor sort of explicit authority to do this type of work. And so they said, if the legislature wants to make that change, it can.
Yeah, so we are taking the court up on that and making that change. And are there, thank you so much, Becky. Are there other questions for Jeremy? Yes, Senator White.
Thank you, Chair Hardy. So one of the things that I appreciate that the auditor has the ability to do is to look at the practices and kind of the bigger questions of a company's behavior or activity. And I'm wondering if we don't move forward with this language, we're putting into question if the auditor can do that work within what I'm understanding contractors at AOT. So I'm just wondering if you could reflect on that, and if you feel like we would be missing a very important service that it sounds like the auditor is performing now.
So I'm not sure if I fully understand your question, but sort of in a behavioral sense, right? The contractors, how do I want to say this? Compliance to the contract, we ensure.
Great.
Their ethical behavior outside of compliance and performance of the contract, we don't necessarily look at. But I think under this bill, the auditor wouldn't be able to look at that either, because it's strictly related to performance of the contract.
And that, I think, well, there's a debate with that language, but I do actually think that there is a way that we can look at performance as it relates to the employee-employer relationship, for example. So I am concerned because I do think that we have an obligation to allow the auditor to look into those questions. And I do think that the narrowing with performance can take that away. So you're actually going to have less of a concern with this language than kind of
Absolutely.
the carte blanche before.
Absolutely.
But I also think that the performance piece, we could address some of those questions as well that might not be already caught through your very rigorous standards.
Sure, and if I could just expand upon the employee-employer relationship a little bit. So we obviously follow Davis-Bacon on 95% of our projects, let's say. We have a whole civil rights section. They go out to our projects. Our resident engineers check weekly payrolls. We have the poster boards up if you feel you are discriminated against, harassed, et cetera. So I do think we have a fairly rigorous employee-employer oversight role. And I'm not sure what else there would be necessarily. And I think it, to your point, would be a challenge to define beyond those bounds what performance of the contract relevance there was.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your patience. You are our last witness, so you got a little bit more grilling than you may have expected.
My
But
pleasure.
I think I'm glad that we were able to get you in. And what it sounds like to me is that while you're not, you can't give it the stamp of approval, you're more comfortable with this version than previous version.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad to hear that. So thank you so
Thank you
much for
very
making the time for us today. Okay. So I think Becky has to leave. So maybe she's already left. Okay, does anyone have a
Nope, she's
last
right there.
30-second question for Becky? Because thanks, guys, really appreciate it. Because I know you have to leave, and we're gonna vote on the bill, so just quick, Senator Clarkson, quick
If
question.
we were to update just to go to Bob's concerns, that we should be looking at the Secretary of State and the Treasurer, make sure that actually they're identified as agents of the state in their statutes. Is that something we should maybe put on our something to look at later?
I think we can put it on our something to look at later.
Yes,
We are not gonna do it in this.
We're not gonna
bill.
do it before 3:30.
Yeah, so
Given it's
we can put a
3:20.
pin in that and have further discussion.
Yeah, but it just
I'm
strikes me that
we have a miscellaneous bill, so,
Stay with me.
Tucker, I don't know if that's a.
thanks, Becky. Really appreciate your time. And we're gonna vote this bill. Do you need to be here for us to vote it, or?
No, I was just gonna say I can send a clean copy to Olivia because this version has the highlights in it.
Oh, right, yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
You too, thanks.
Thanks.
Do you need a motion?
Sure.
I move that we find S9 draft 1.3 favorable.
Excellent. Can you, ask Senator Watson?
That's not 1.3.
We're gonna wait for Senator Watson to come back in, but we have a motion. Is there any discussion as we wait for our colleagues?
Can we hold the vote open even?
We're not holding the vote open. We are gonna just discuss it while we allow Ann to get through here.
Getting the hook. This is the hook out of her purse.
Yep, she's getting the hook. She knew she was gonna get the hook to come over and vote. Do you have the sheet to vote, Bob? You are prepared.
On top of it,
No,
he's a great.
Olivia is
partner.
prepared. She put the sheet.
Olivia brings
I'll
cookies
get it.
and
I
makes
know.
sure that Senator Larson.
She's out of the room. We can't speak so kindly of her.
I'm ready for a cookie and a cup.
Okay, cookies are coming around.
I do want to ask you about the cookies, though. There's like a banana flavor.
Oh, I didn't
to
get
it.
banana, I got cinnamon, because if I got
Oh.
banana, I would have been.
Here is Senator Watson. So Senator Watson, just to bring you up to date, we are voting on S9. Here is
The latest
the
version.
latest version that has hopefully addressed some concerns, most of the concerns, not every single issue concern, but
But good.
wait, Allison. So, we had a motion and we're in discussion phase. So if
Okay.
you have any discussion, we're gonna give you the floor first.
Oh, wow, well, thank you.
Sorry you haven't been here to hear it all. but-
No, it's fine. I had a question about that statement as it relates to the performance of the contract, and that's in there, so.
Been there multiple times.
Yeah.
General loss.
I think it's, I'm happy to
Looking good.
And
Yeah.
looking good on it. Okay, so the clerk shall call the roll.
Everyone all set? Senator Gahuski,
Yes.
Senator White,
Yes.
Senator Norris with explanation, no. Senator Watson,
Yes.
Senator Clarkson,
Yes.
Chair Hardy.
Yes.
So Senator Watson needs to go back.
I
or are you
do.
done?
I do
Okay,
need to
so
go back.
Senator Watson's gonna go back to approach and
Thank you very much.
You got it.
Senator Norris, thank you.
We're glad you're there.
How do you do, I've never had a vote explanation in committee, what is,
Please can explain it to us
I'm
now.
just gonna explain it to you now.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's not really official.
it's not,
I think the committee has worked hard on this bill, and I appreciate the last ditch effort, I really do. I think that it was much better. I'm still a little bit at ease with it, you know, it was truly 50-50. I didn't mean to let anybody down here, but I do appreciate the effort that was put into, shall we say, appeasing my concerns here, but thank you anyways.
Yeah.
But you're still voting no.
I already did this official.
It's not official until you turn it. Only a fool doesn't change their mind.
Oh.
It's pretty much a no.
I got it. It's a hard no.
But
It's
thank you
fine, it's
anyways.
fine,
I
you know.
appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to make sure that you felt more comfortable with it, so.
I did, but I just got the bill when I walked in here, you know, there wasn't a major changes and whatever else, but I needed a little more time to process it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry about that. We would have waited till tomorrow, but we have our field trip, so I needed to get it voted out today, so.
Oh, no,
And
thank
if
I
you,
appreciate that.
you know, you can change your vote on the floor and vote yes.
I realize that.
So, you have another chance at
Okay.
it. And, thank you for working with us on it.
Thank you.
And I talked with Senator Clarkson, I'm gonna report it. And since I've had a lot of conversations, more than I wanted to on this bill, so I'll report it. And, I think we are, so one thing before you walk out, Senator White.
I was gonna open the door.
Oh, no, we're
live.
still live.
Oh,
We are taking our field trip tomorrow to the state archives. We are leaving here at
1:15.
1:15. So meet here, and we can talk about carpooling so that we're not all driving down there. And this House committee is coming with us. So, and it won't take, you know, it's gonna be about
90 minutes.
about 90 minutes.
Good.
So we should be done by 3. And so be prepared to have fun and learn stuff about our state archives.
I'm
And
definitely-
Tanya will be hosted by
Wait.
the
I know it's so weird, I'm rarely in the room with another Tanya.
Really?
Doesn't happen often.